Welcome to After Further Consideration, a DEI-focused podcast brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Dr. Cody Nielsen, Executive Director of Convergent Strategies and Higher Education faculty member.
And I'm Dr. Tomika Ferguson, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence, and an Assistant Professor at Virginia Commonwealth University School of Education. We're sitting down with seasoned change leaders for candid chats about responsive leadership, addressing campus crises, navigating institutional shifts, and fostering sustainable change, all through the lens of equity and inclusion.
Join us every other Tuesday to learn about these leaders' real-life challenges, lessons learned, and the innovative solutions they develop to tackle these complex issues.
Our goal is to help you drive positive and inclusive change on your campus.
After Further Consideration is a part of the Enrollify Network, a community of innovators, thinkers, and doers dedicated to revolutionizing higher education. Learn new skills, find your next big idea, and network with the industry's best minds at enrollify.org.
Enrollify is presented by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Today's guest is Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. Eddie is the founder of America and More, a national DEI consulting firm focused on supporting a revisioning of equity and inclusion in corporate, education, community, and nonprofit organizations. The founder of the White Privilege Conference, which has for 25 years been bringing folks together to address systemic and structural inequality, Dr. Moore is a nationally known voice on DEI work. A former school educator in places like Brooklyn, New York, and Seattle, Washington, Dr. Moore has his Midwest ties as well, with a PhD from the University of Iowa, and he is a proud graduate of Cornell College. Eddie, welcome to the show.
What's up, Cody? What's up, Tomika? I'm so honored. I appreciate y'all bringing a brother on. I'm happy to be here.
We're excited to have
Eddie,
you
I'm
here.
so excited that you are joining us, and you and I had a chance to meet a little bit more than a year ago, and since then I feel like I've been really brought into some of the work that you've been able to do. But I want you to tell our audience your story. Tell us how you got into this work of DEI. Take us back a decade or two and tell us a little bit more of your story as we get started.
Oh, I might need another decade just to get into that decade. Really, though, I started out as a football player, basically. I mean, that's what got me to college. I had three older brothers growing up. They got in some trouble. I was in a situation where I was flirting in and out of trouble. My mom was trying to get me as far away from home as possible. And I was growing up in Florida, Southwest Florida, and I got a chance to play college football and basketball at the small college. You mentioned Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa. And that was really the start. I mean, just getting me out of my situation, I think, gave me a kind of ability to see myself farther than I imagined myself. But the journey didn't really stop there, or I think maybe even start there. It kind of went forward and came backwards. So I graduated college and I came back home. I got with the same people my mom tried to get me away from. 2 years, I was a full-fledged alcoholic and crackhead. I was a college graduate, functioning drug and alcoholic. And really the start for me getting on this path of where I am today, Dr. Diversity, from crackhead to PhD, was another chance. I mean, I was stealing from my work, funding my drug habit. The women over me at my job said, hey, we're going to give you a chance to either get sober or we're going to call the police. And I took sobriety, and that was 30 something years ago. And that opportunity really propelled me into my master's degree opportunity, coming back to Iowa, to Loras College. Met a college professor there, said, hey, you should consider going for your PhD at the University of Iowa. Again, giving me a chance to see myself farther than what I imagined myself. Applied, worked with him, got into the University of Iowa. And that was really the almost like slingshot that sent me out into the world of academia, consulting, conferencing. And I've been basically trying not to screw up this second chance at life that I received And that was really the start. From there, I was presenting at conferences, I was starting my research. I mean, the real kind of catalyst to the white privilege conference came in my first PhD course. We had a young associate professor who really challenged our cohort to do diversity work by incorporating white supremacy, white privilege, and all forms of oppression. In fact, she argued you're not really doing diversity work unless you factor those issues into your work and research. And I did all my work and research from that point on with white supremacy, white privilege, and all forms of oppression kind of as the foundation. And that began to be the building block for the white privilege conference. So I finished my coursework. My first job was back at Cornell College as the director of diversity. And the first event that I launched as the director of multicultural life at Cornell College was the White Privilege Conference. And that was 25 years ago. So that's kind of how it all got started for me. And I just want to reiterate, I'm just fortunate, blessed to have a second chance at life and really trying to do the best I can to pour back positive good into the world where really I shouldn't even be here, to be honest with y'all, Tomika, Cody. I could give you story after story that has me sometimes wondering how in the world something greater than me is involved in this universe. And I'm just really fortunate that I'm here with y'all today. And that's a little bit about how I got started.
What's so interesting about your story? One is I appreciate you starting your story where you started, because a lot of times leaders like to start with their first success. So telling a story about where you've come from kind of also gives us insight into your purpose. And it also lets me know that you know how to connect with a variety of people, because you clearly are going to have empathy and connection with the vast amount of people, whether they're feeling at, their lowest, whether they have experienced addiction, they know someone with addiction. Like, your story resonates with much of America and kind of where we're at. But one thing that's really powerful about what you shared is that you shared, I shouldn't even be here. And with all of the accolades that, you can Google and read, Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. has done a lot. You've influenced a lot of people in your 3 decades of commitment. When you say I shouldn't be here, do you ever feel like you have these moments where this is definitely my purpose and my calling? Like, I'm supposed to be in these spaces. Have you had any of those moments? And if so, like, I wonder, what was your reaction to those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I just had a chance. I was saying to y'all briefly before we got on live here, working with some young kids, middle school in Iowa, and just remember being 13, 14, right? Just feeling like, I got a chance to imprint the life of these young people for the rest of their life. That this is what I've been called to do. After that presentation, I had a chance to talk with some formerly incarcerated gentlemen about just really the path forward, sharing my own struggles and how the only difference between them and me in reference to incarceration was I got lucky. I was really fortunate. So it was in those two moments, just relatively recently, that I'm feeling like, wow, this is what I've been called to do. But now, even look at the landscape of where we are with the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion right now, right? Like, people are asking me, Doc, are you worried? Doc, are you afraid? I'm like, nah, fam, this is what I've been training for. Like, this is my time right here. Like, this is what I've been reading about, what I've been writing about. Like, this is the Super Bowl for social justice. And, when you get to those big games, whether it's FIFA, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's, American football and the Super Bowl, I mean, you hear these interviews where people say, I worked my entire career to get to this moment. And so right now, I feel like more than ever in the work of social justice, right? This is Dr. Diversity's moment. And I'm just so prepared, so excited, so ready for this time. This is my time.
Not too many people would have this same position that you're taking on this, or that same attitude, right? Cody and I were able to debrief at a conference in Minneapolis, and just meet up. And I was attending the ASH conference, and there's so many fears, right? Just on campus, I feel the fear. In my email, I feel the fear. On social media, there's fear. Just even like I think about being around family and friends right now, there's so much fear. But your approach is that this is what we've been preparing for. And I think that's a really unique way to frame what we're going into because diversity, equity, and inclusion work is very easy when it's their freedom and there are no restraints. It's only like changing hearts and minds, and there's a pathway to change policies. But what we're seeing is a complete eradication of decades of work, complete eradication of a lot of work that you and other folks have done, like, Cody and I, and people who are committed to really not just changing hearts and minds, but policy. A lot of our work and our efforts are being completely erased very swiftly. And so it's almost like, how do we approach our work? How do we approach this upcoming season, this new season that we're in, with kind of that same attitude that you have? I would really love for you to talk about that and frame it under, this is a crisis. And for some people, this is the first diversity, equity, and inclusion related crisis of their lifetime or their professional career. So it can seem scary and daunting and overwhelming. So how can you help other leaders in this work reframe their approach in this season?
Yeah, yeah. It's really an important, question to be asking as I think about, just even trying to share this spirit because it's not always received in a warm way. It's like, I remember early on in the work where I felt like people were just kumbaya, festivals and holidays, right? Like that's what diversity work is. That's what diversity work is all about. And I used to get so frustrated. So I want to be careful not to send a kind of impression that I feel like the rainbow on the other side is almost there, right? Like this is a difficult time that we're in. But I do think what gets me so excited is, again, I feel like an elite athlete. Like, not everybody gets to ski on the same mountains as the Olympic athletes. Not everybody gets to play on the courts that Serena and Venus got to play on because it's another level that they were competing at. And so I really feel like what we're facing now, particularly around white supremacy, white Christian ideology, white male dominance, all things I remember learning in graduate school, and people saying, whoa, whoa, it's not that bad. Wait a minute. We're not going to go back to those days. Those days aren't going to, those days are behind us, right? And here we are now. You got folks on TV saying, I'm a white nationalist. Like I'm fighting for white supremacy, right? And you got people at school board meetings. You got people running for office. You got people in the doctor's office, the dentist's office, at the bank, at the school building, right? This is where we see the most, I think, in our lifetime, visible presence of white supremacy ideology. And that's another level of challenge. And that's what I feel ready for. And I feel like I'm saying to organizations, if you don't go with Dr. Diversity, that's fine. But make sure you get somebody with some confidence about this time, not fears. Now, not that I'm not strategic and I'm not naive to think that everything's all, rosy on the other side, like I said earlier. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not afraid of you, right? I'm prepared. I'm well read. I'm ready to write it out. I'm ready to talk it out. I'm ready to cry it out. I'm ready to self-care it. I think I have all the components that's needed. And that's what I'm talking about. And what I'm saying to leaders that this is where our hope, this is why you went to the conference. This is where you're supposed to be using the things that you've learned. And so I'm just trying to continue to not only talk about it, as they say in my neighborhood, but just be about it. I can't really give the instruction all the time because I don't know where people are. And sometimes I don't even know them that well enough. I just want to make sure that my actions are matching my words. And I'm letting the white supremacy ideology, white supremacist, white ideology supporters know that this is one practitioner who's not afraid. And I feel like we can do some good work during this time. We got to be more collaborative. We got to be more positive. We got to take care of ourselves better. But this is the moment for those of us who've been at it for 20 plus years. Now's our time to shine.
I love this, Eddie. And I think the passion behind that is so driven. And, that's what I've experienced in meeting you and just being able to give this sort of time to spotlight you. There's a lot that you've already talked about in terms of inspirational moments, your background personally, and all of these things. I wonder if you can share for us maybe one or two specific crises or defining moments in the work that really have shifted or shaped you. Things that we sort of can uplift from your work in those moments that have prepared you for this moment that you're in.
Yeah, I think hate mail is one of the things that I think kind of shook me a little bit in my early development from a leadership standpoint, challenging white supremacy. And again, I think I had known about Klansmen and white supremacists, but I'd never gotten mail from them. I've never had them show up at the place and space where we existed. And I think that was one of the kind of jolting things for me when you're looking outside and you're seeing live white supremacists in protest of your event. And it just really shook me in a way to think about security and really almost like they say in the neighborhood, your head on a swivel that I hadn't really thought about. I was a bit naive, I think, in those early years about, almost like martyrdom, like I'll be okay. Well, that could be true, but you still got to take care of yourself. You got to have your head on a swivel. So I think that's one thing that got me is that white supremacy, the hate of white supremacy ideology is real. And I've seen them face to face at an event coming after me and receive things from them that has me now as a leader just being head on a swivel, not being afraid, just being prepared. I think also some of the challenges around when people hear the white privilege conference and they hear the name Eddie Moore, they don't think it's me. So, I mean, it's been a real challenge being a Black leader in the 21st century for me. And what is some of the toughest challenges have been is even when you're in charge, you just try to stay positive. You try to do the right things. You're not stealing anything. You're not hurting anybody. All the things that could warrant you receiving some doubt and negativity. I just have done the best I can not to be that kind of person, but still, like, people can't believe it's your idea. People can't believe like you're in charge. Like, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many degrees you have, what letters are in front of your name, it still doesn't feel like you're the one in charge. So I think that piece around Black leadership in a leadership position still throws me back. It's I want to say it's amazing that still happens, but to some extent, I don't know if those are, I just would say it still hurts when that happens, is what I would say. But that too, just again, has me more energized and trying to remind, particularly young people of color, that your ideas, I mean, like, it's important to be thinking and dreaming and believing. Because I wish I had a nickel for everybody that said, nobody's going to come to the white privilege conference, right? Like, if you don't change the name of that conference, it's not going to be successful, right? Like, I didn't let somebody's doubt and hate really put out a flame that was lit inside of me by something far greater than me. And that's really the piece that I continue to try to move forward with. But those are a couple of things, that hate and that doubt around leadership as a Black person, a Black man, are some of the things that have kind of jarred me along the way. but I'm going to keep on swinging in reference to the hate. And I'm going to also just keep being a positive light for young people around taking their ideas and going for it. Like, believe in the inspiration that comes to you when you don't expect it to come to you. Because let me tell y'all, lastly, I didn't grow up thinking someday, hey, I'm going to be the founder of the White Privilege Conference. Like, I'm going to be a social justice speaker. Like, I'm going to write books about education. Like, I wanted to play football, fam. And here I am on your show talking about what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. That to me is divine
Mm.
intervention. And I just want to continue to inspire young people to run with that light that's lit while you're
Love
sleeping.
it.
See, I love it probably for different reasons than Cody. As a former collegiate track and field athlete, all of your references to running are making me like feel nostalgic. I was a sprinter jumper, so I didn't run that far, but I do appreciate it because I think in the work that I do, athletes and athletics builds a certain level, a certain identity, a certain way of approaching problems that we're not easily deterred, right? Like we've lost enough to know how to win even when losing. And I what I see and I hear and what you're sharing and even just the evidence in your career is someone who understands how to turn like these devastating situations and what you describe is like the hate and the constant disregard and the desire to silence and just like completely eradicate your work that you keep doing, that athlete mindset to still be able to push through the difficulty of showing up. And I just wanted to name that because I do believe that in doing this work and running the race and the journey and the fierceness that we have to have in doing this work, the courage that it takes to overcome just the small samples that you've shared with us, right? Hate mail, people protesting not only what you're doing, but protesting who you are, right? And that's important. Like you were protested against. Dr. Eddie Moore was the one who was like the purpose and who was centered in doing this. And I also, I appreciate you sharing that as a leader and as someone who has books, plural, decades of work, evidence of impact, you still, as a Black man, as a Black leader, experience people questioning you and your aspirations and your ability. And I think so many folks can relate to that because when you're doing work that doesn't seem that it's catching on to the masses, that it is something that is on the margins, right? That's the work that you think is going to be protested. But you're like, no, it's my work and it's me. And I wonder for some people, if they wrestle with that, how might that work with them and help them to develop a stronger leadership ability. But the follow-up question I really want to get to, I just had to say that because I was just thinking like, man, he's dropping these nuggets and I'm getting inspired in this time is optimism is something that I don't think a lot of people would associate with handling and managing a crisis, right? People tend to go to strategy. People tend to go to organization. When you have had to deal with specifically, the protests that happened at the White Privilege Conference, how did you respond to the protests and the hate mail? What were some actual deliberate things that you had to do in order for this to continue across so many years?
Yeah, it's so good. Thank you for that opportunity. I wanted to just quickly, though, before I get at that piece, and say something about the team and sports piece that I think is so essential as well. Like, I just don't feel like losing is in my vocabulary. I mean, that's where I'm at. And I learned a lot of that through sports and the participation in sport. I mean, failure's always an option. It's just not the one I'm choosing. And I think the recovery, the work of coming from crackhead to PhD plays a tremendous part of that as well. But I want to mention an additional skill set that I received through athletic participation. Now, I played football, baseball, and basketball for 4 years in college when I was an undergrad. And I tell you, the one also super skill I got was people, right? Like being able to be in communication, in collaboration, not only through the sport I participated in, but all the other sports that were practicing around us as well, right? I just really developed a real kind of skill set that I still feel like is so useful today in my ability to connect with folks, as well as being able to see people go from racist to open and friendship. Like people can change. And again, there's some pancakes you'll never flip over. Don't get me wrong. I get that. But I know through my teamwork, through my participation in team, that I've seen some folks change. And that's been a real important part of my work and my skill set, which gets to your question about this piece around dealing with that hatred, but also this optimism piece. So, I remember early on, someone was saying to me, one of my teammates, Marquita Jones, used to say, Doc, you can't let this hate get you down, right? Listen, the fact that they're responding to you means you're doing something good. I never took that. I never forgotten that when I got that news from Marquita. She was a young professional too, just schooling her supervisor, saying, Doc, take it as a compliment. And now when people call me saying, oh, I'm worried, I just got some hate mail, I was like, hate mail? Congratulations. Get some more, baby. Go out there and get it, get it, get it. Like when you get the hate, that means you're doing something great. So I think that trying to respond and be too overly worried, I'm not going to spend my energy there. I'm going to take that acknowledgement. Again, be strategic, keep my head on the swivel. But remember, if you're doing good DEI work, you're doing social justice work, you're going to piss somebody off along the way. That means your work is good. And so I tell people all the time, I'm not optimistic. I'm not an optimistic person. I mean, you watch what we've watched over these last 5 years, George Floyd in particular, dying on TV right before our eyes. It's hard for me to hold a light of optimism up all the time. Now, I'm not pessimistic either. Remember, I'm a crackhead with a PhD. It's hard for me to get down. If I'm waking up breathing, like I got a chance. I'm ready. I tell people I'm not pessimistic at all. So I had to create a new word. I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm what I call pessimistic. And pessimistic means you're optimistic, but you're doing stuff. My philosophy is whatever it is I'm facing, I'm always coming at it with an action item. And again, for resistance, taking care of myself, right? Making sure that I'm also being strategic about where we have people in the organization that's going to help us if we're dealing with a security situation. You got to take all that into account, but also making sure that what people are coming for, like I'm not going to let my job be sacrificed due to my fears of some folks out there who are trying to bring us down. Last thing I'll say is this. My experience has been over the years that usually that resistance is small in number, big in bark, right? That what I'm more frustrated by in today's society is not the racists. I mean, I like racists and white supremacists, especially when they're bold and out front. I like illuminated racism, white supremacy. The thing that worries me is good people with good hearts who are saying nothing. It's the quiet participant. That's where I think the work is lying right now, and what I'm trying to get at and be more strategic about. Not that loud, boisterous, small voice that's coming from the corner, but that person may be smiling right in my face and not really on board and could be causing more harm than good.
Mhm. Yeah, Eddie, I think like all of this and all of the pieces that you're sharing, I think are going to be really inspirational for our audience. I feel like one of the things that you should know is Tomika and I over here take notes and we are fervently writing on this stuff. I'm wondering if you can share with us just a couple of actionable strategies, like really deep actionable strategies. Folks on our podcast are at varying levels of leadership within their organizations, and we have a lot of higher end professionals. Wondering if you could sort of think through some of those steps for leaders to take at all those different levels about where they can go in this time at this moment around our equity and inclusion focus.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is you got to know your stuff. I think just being competent and staying up to date around what's going on. And so I think that whatever your resources, your newsletters are, your websites or people you're following, I do think that there's got to be some dedication, some discipline applied to knowledge acquisition. And I think Malcolm Gladwell put it beautifully in the book Outliers that, again, in order to be a professional in any field, you got to put in the time. He says 10,000 hours. So that to me, I think there's no shortcut to success, if you ask me. You got to put in the work. Secondly, you got to take care of yourself because, again, if you're good, you're going to be making people upset. And a lot of times when you're making people upset, they're going to be coming after you a little bit. And so you can't let that be the overwhelming feeling that you're participating in every day. You got to put it aside. You got to do some breathing. You got to do some reflecting. You got to do some walking, taking care of your diet, eating right. The self care plan has to be improved. I know I needed to do some of that for myself as well. I think again, a third thing is collaborative. I mean, I'm trying to do a better job of this even as I look at 2025 and some of my goals as a consultant, is I want to be in more collaboration with folks. And so I think operating from a model of abundance, not a model of scarcity. Fourth thing is I want to pour out into young people. I mean, I really want to just be drained of all the blessings I possess and giving it to as many young people as possible. That's refueling for me. That's something that really helps me in reference to what I do to kind of keep myself going. And as a strategy is I try to, sometimes if I could get some working gigs with young people, that's always great. But even if I'm, trying to do some things in some different places where I can visit a school or I can pop in on a classroom when I got a break at a school, right? That's the other thing. And last thing I would say for folks now, this is just for me. I gotta take care of my faith. I got spiritually, whatever it is for you. There's something for me, I believe, internally that's greater than me that keeps me going, and I got to make sure I keep that solid. For me, I'm a faith-based guy coming from a Southern Baptist church kind of background, so I got to do my little daily prayer reflection for me, but something that reminds me that I'm just fortunate to be breathing this morning and say thank you. That's something I'm trying to also keep as a part of my regular day. That's a good strategy for me as well.
There's something about gratitude. I think no matter what your faith or non-faith is, gratitude is something we all can participate in. And it becomes something that we have to revisit because hate, as you've described it, and the challenges that we are facing right now, these crises, they constantly take things out and we have to pour back in. As we come to a close, I wanted to revisit one point. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to bring it back. You said you're trying to figure out how do you motivate the quiet participant. I'm so inspired by that question. I'm so inspired by that approach because, I think about from a higher education perspective, we have conversations about bystander intervention. We try to use education to motivate people, even folks who might be more internally processing and not as extroverted or not as outgoing as others. And so we've tried so many strategies across the years, both in the literature, through research, through conversations in class, just interrogating how can we create spaces and environments for everyone to fully participate. And in every one of those environments, we have these quiet participants. And one of my frustrations, and it's not necessarily at the individual, but it's that sometimes the quietness comes from fear. Sometimes it comes from, as you mentioned, a lack of information. It's so many ways that someone can feel as though they're not inclined to speak, but they can't control the perception, right? When people are quiet in moments of crisis, in hardship, in hatred, and oppression, it's immediately like, you've done absolutely nothing. You must not care. And so that then does not create motivation for someone to participate. So just as a person who is who's a educator, a researcher, a scholar in this area, I'm interested. What are you finding out about ways to motivate quiet participants?
My jingle is this for the audience. I just believe this wholeheartedly and abide by this everywhere I go. The best friend that hate has is silence. I really just want to start there with my quiet participant to say that your voice doesn't have to be the only way you speak, but you got to participate because the best friend that hate has is silence. So I'm starting there. I think it's the participation, the interruption is a practice. And so, yeah, I go back to the old Allen Iverson line. You talk about practice? Yeah, I'm talking about practice. Yes, yes. I really believe that people have gotten and sometimes receive conditioning to be quiet. And so I think that the real skill of participation of interruption is just that, and it takes practice. And so I'm like a middle school teacher in my adult workshops, right? I'll call on you. I mean, even if you don't say it out loud, just give it to me on a sheet of paper, right? I want you to show me some ways that you can participate in this interaction because I do know that some people are not comfortable up in front of the crowd like I am. So maybe you could give me a song that can really summarize where you are right now, or a lyric from a song, right? Maybe you can, again, just give me a sheet of paper or something, but non participation is not an option. And so I think that what I'm trying to do in the places and spaces where I am is really, again, motivate folks in a way that's not demeaning, not degrading. I'm not feeling better because I'm making somebody feel worse, right? Like that's just not a healthy developmental training or practitioner guide, right? Also reminding people like silence is not an option, fam. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I'm a parent, right? I gotta challenge you to be a participant here because it's in my DNA as an educator. So let's find a way you can get in. Let's find a way you can be a part of this. And so trying to be diverse in my options for you to participate, but your participation is not an option. And then lastly, I mean, again, just trying to be in celebration of not be in fear, but in celebration of the opportunities we have ahead. We got some mountains to climb ahead of us, y'all. But I tell you what, I am so excited about what we can do in this time. And this is where I do my best work, is when the odds are stacked against me. All right, I feel so much better when the score is 21-0 after the first quarter. And I got to go in and say to my teammates, listen, y'all, we just got off to a slow start, but we know we can do this thing. So let's do it. Let's get to work. And let's be realistic. Let's be positive. Let's be collaborative. And let's have some fun while we're doing this along the way. That's where I feel like we are right now. This is our time. The theme for WPC 26 Connecticut is now is our time. And if there's any time the world needs social justice advocates with experience, with skills, and with action oriented practices, is now. And I'm just proud to be one of those folks. And I'm honored for the opportunity to share a little bit of myself here with y'all today.
Eddie, thank you so much. And I think you leave with such a positive and inspirational tone for our listeners. I think in a time where DEI is under such threat, I think you have turned the table for us. And I'm just really grateful for that. I'd want to thank you for being with us. For those, as we've talked about the White Privilege Conference, WPC 25 in Hartford, please come to Hartford, Connecticut, March 26th through the 29th. You can look it up at theprivilegeinstitute.com. I'll be there. Maybe we'll get Tomika there as well, hopefully so. And Eddie, I want to thank you again for being with us on After Further Consideration. That wraps up today's episode of After Further Consideration. We hope our conversation has sparked new ideas and provided valuable insights for your own work in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion on your campus and beyond.
Thank you for listening in. Remember, fostering meaningful change is a journey. Be encouraged and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in creating a more inclusive educational environment. After Further Consideration is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too.
Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from Brian Piper, Allison Tercio, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed.
Enrollify is presented by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.